Have you ever been on an owl prowl? It's a nighttime hike in the woods where you listen for the calls, shrieks, and whistles of owls to help you get a glimpse of them. For this month's Chirp Chat, Lake Effect's Excrement Nunez spoke with Mary Hollaback, Nathaniel Reinertz, and John O'Donnell at the River Edge Nature Center. They each help lead annual owl prowls in the Saukville area and explain how people can see and hear owls around this time of year and into the winter.
I am so excited to be chatting with you all today at the River Edge Nature Center. And today is especially fun because we'll be talking all about owls. So, owls are birds of prey, but what are some characteristics that make owls different from other raptors?
There are quite a few characteristics that differentiate owls from other raptors. Owls have approximately 1 million rods per millimeter in the brain, compared to humans who have 200,000 millimeters of rods. Now, with rods, that's how the bird is able to see, or we're able to see at night. Basically, rods pick up black and white, cones pick up color. So owls have a very unique system of vision and have brains that are equipped to provide them with night vision. Owls also have incredible hearing, and they have asymmetrical ears. So the left ear is positioned slightly lower than the right ear. And so the owls, by angling their heads and looking at direction of a sound, they can do what's called triangulation. So they can precisely see where the sound is coming from, and they're able to differentiate the sound of a mouse at night walking on leaves, and to know it's a mouse and not a cricket, not a frog. And it's incredible how they're able to find and easily get prey under very harsh conditions, even when it's windy.
So, I also kind of want to mention some other characteristics about owls. Their silent flight, their wings.
Yeah, if you look at the margin of a flight feather of an owl and compare it to the margin of a flight feather of a songbird, it's strikingly different. If you look at it in magnification, the edge of the owl's feather is frilled. They've got little fibers that don't join to each other at the edge, where, let's say, a cardinal feather, if you look at that in the microscope, the little individual barbs of the feather join all the way to the margin of said feather so that it has a crisp edge. It looks real aerodynamic, where an owl's feather is fringed along the margin, which aids in their silent flight.
I wonder also about their sound. Do all owls hoot?
Oh, no. In fact, only a couple of them do anything that's like a hoot. Well, we've got 3 owls in the area that do a genuine hoot, I would think. Great horn, the barred, and the long-eared owls. But they've all got a pretty complicated language, and some of our smaller owls do all kinds of whistles and shrieks and cries and whinnies. They also snap their bills. You have to be at real close range to hear that, but that's also part of their language, is bill snapping.
What other types of owls can people see this time of year around southeast Wisconsin?
Well, typically we have great horned owls, barred owls, eastern screech owls, and also at this time of year we have owls that are migrating through southeastern Wisconsin, some of whom will spend the winter here. For example, northern saw-whet owls typically overwinter in southeastern Wisconsin. We also have snowy owls that come through, and it's a little unpredictable as to how many snowy owls will show up in a particular year, and that relates to the lemming supply up north. If there are lots of lemmings up north, typically then there'll be fewer snowy owls that come down.
I'm also curious, what are some reasons that owls stay in the area year-round?
Well, this part of Wisconsin has plenty of good habitat. Wisconsin, first of all, is probably 70% of it is forested. And these owls, almost all 3 of the more common ones, do use trees to some degree or another. The barred owl and the screech owl both can nest in cavities, so they could use an old cavity. And the great horned owl will actually use the nest of other owls or hawks, and those are all birds that all nest in trees of some sort. So they rely on the forest for their food, but also for their nesting sites. We aren't heavily populated like some of the other states, and further away from the city, there's certainly plenty of good habitat for all three owls to survive.
Absolutely. So for people who are interested in going out and looking for owls, can you explain what an owl prowl is?
Well, an owl prowl is a night outing. Typically, we start at dusk. We're going to have an owl prowl coming up at the Cedarburg Bog. So it goes from 5 until 7, and we basically go to 2 or 3 different locations around the bog where we're likely to hear and see owls, and we do have to use a recording to get the owl to respond. That's not something that's recommended to be done on a frequent basis, given that it would stress the owl out if this was happening often. But if we do it occasionally, and that's what we do on the owl prowl, is we do these occasionally, and we typically do get responses from northern saw-whet owls, and we do the same for eastern screech owls and for barred owls, and I don't think we've ever struck out on barred owls. They're very responsive to recordings. And sometimes we don't even have to play a recording. We might be playing a screech owl recording or a saw-whet owl recording, and the barred owl comes in, perhaps looking for breakfast. But it's a fun activity. It's novel. And we've been doing these for 25, 30 years, once or twice, sometimes even 3 times a year in different locations.
Oh, wow. And what are some tips to help people identify owls, especially since most owl watching happens at night, like you just mentioned?
Well, it helps to have a guide who can identify the owl. But typically before we go out, we do show pictures. We even have specimens that we have people take a look at so that they know what to expect. And if we're lucky to get a flashlight on the owl, it's typically not going to be real close to us. So mainly it's just shape and behavior, and it starts with hearing the owl vocalize, and hopefully not too long thereafter we get a look at it.
So it almost seems like your ears are your eyes in this when you're on an owl prowl.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
What are some things that people should avoid or not do when they're on an owl prowl?
Well, of course, if you want to hear owls, you need to be quiet, and that's oftentimes hard to do when you have a group of people together. But we normally would recommend that people, if they're going to talk, whisper. Try not to shuffle your feet too much. Most of the time, stand still if you're going to be playing a recording, trying to get the owls to respond. People are, of course, out in the dark, and they want to bring a flashlight. Oftentimes, we tell them to cover it with red cellophane, or if it's a really bright night because there's a full moon or whatever, you may not need the flashlight. Your night vision is better if, in fact, you don't have bright light around you, so best not to use the flashlight unless you need it. And again, it's just dressing for the weather. And go to the right habitat. That's the best way. If you know a specific type of bird that you're interested in, you might search out that type of habitat and go to that appropriate place to find that species.
Right. I mean, all of these things that we're doing, like, this is to be respectful to the owls, correct?
Correct, yes. I mean, as we go into the winter months, the great horned owl is the first one to start nesting in the state. So by January 1st, they've already set up a territory, found a mate. They may even be already in the process of building a nest, and so on. By the end of January, they're laying their first egg. So you wouldn't want to be drawing that bird off of the nest by playing a call that sounds like a competing great horned owl in the area. So being respectful and wise about when these birds are nesting. So that's why doing a prowl at this time of the year isn't as chancy. You're not drawing a bird away from its nest. You might be drawing it off of its territory, but it's not nesting at this time of the year. So, and a lot of these birds are in migration or whatever, so you're not taking them away from their young or their eggs or away from a territory that might get taken over by another species or another bird.
Right. And just to clarify, each owl species starts nesting at a different time of year.
very true. So the great horns are the first ones, and they're the first ones in the state altogether, of any species of birds to start nesting. But then as we go into February, March, that's when the other owls, like barred owls and screech owls, would start, setting up territories and finding a mate and that sort of thing. So as we go into the spring, all of our songbirds will be coming back then too. And also not wise to be playing recordings of birds at that time of the year either, to draw them away from their nests.
Right. Thank you. We're talking about all of these very cool facts about owls, but I also want to highlight the important role that owls play in our ecosystem.
Well, owls, especially something like the great horned owl, can eat a tremendous number of mice per year. So they believe one adult great horned owl could eat somewhere over 1,000 mice. And so they're a big help to farmers in that way. And if you multiply the fact that the great horned has a mate and then they have offspring, and they're feeding those offspring, the rodents that are found on a farm, for instance, that is a tremendous number of mice that are taken out of that farm field each year. So they don't just strictly eat mice. It depends on the species. Some of them eat, insects and other things if they're a smaller bird. But for the most part, all of them do the same kind of thing. They're all helping to keep down the population of whatever it is, whether it be an insect or, or a mouse, or might include a bat. I don't know.
Well, at the end of every Chirp Chat, I always ask my guests what bird they'd like to shine a spotlight on for the month, in this case, an owl. So what owl should we highlight this month?
Definitely the northern saw-whet owl. It is the cutest owl in North America.
Tell me more about it.
Well, when you look at a northern saw-whet owl and you see those eyes looking back at you, it's magical. And there are a few places here in Wisconsin where you can make prior arrangements to go to a field station where they are misnetting the owls at night and then banding them. And if you go and you hold a northern saw-whet owl and you look at it, it makes an impression that never goes away.
Just for our listeners who aren't familiar with the northern saw-whet owl, can you describe a little bit of what it looks like and what it might sound like?
The northern saw-whet owl is the smallest owl in Wisconsin. It's not much bigger than a soda can. It's mottled brown and blacks and whites and grays. It's got a little round spherical head with eyes taking over much of its face, with bright yellow irises. What they derive their name from is the whetting of a saw. So they do a rising screech. And then they also do a territorial advertisement that is a consistent tooting, like toot, 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 a very monotone tooting. And that can rise and fall and pitch a little bit toward the end from time to time, I think when they're getting excited or territorial. But that sound really stands out in the woods at night, and you're not going to mistake it for another owl.
Well, I can't wait to see my first northern saw-whet owl in the wild one day. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for joining me and chatting with me today.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mary Hollaback is the Citizen Science Manager at River Edge Nature Center, and Nathaniel Reinartz is the Conservation Manager at River Edge Nature Center. John O'Donnell is an avid birder and involved with Friends of the Cedarburg Bog. They all spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez. Some of the owl calls you heard were recorded and provided by Nathaniel Reinartz.